Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to continue talking about Harlequins, starting with Harlequin Masks. A mask is an army and a company of players both. It has no formal leaders, being instead a collective of like-minded devotees of Kagarock. All know their duties through their familiarity with the traditional roles of the characters they have adopted. No Harlequin rules their fellows for long, for all possess an equal voice. The organizational strictures of a mask hail from ancient days, when Kagarock's devotees were theatrical performers first and foremost. Since the fall, a place has traditionally been reserved in a mask's structure should a solitaire lend their considerable abilities to a cause. But they are otherwise unchanged, centered around three distinct troops: the light, the dark, and the twilight. Each contains a different cast of characters, grouped by outlook and symbolism. The light, for example, is especially associated with swift action and the heroic protagonist. By comparison, the dark represents villainous antagonists and violent endings, while the twilight is transitory, like the webway or the fateful journey. This structure ensures that each member is aware of their fellows' roles upon both stage and battlefield. In a similar fashion, each mask plays a unique part in one of the grand masks, operating alongside many other masks to enact Kagarock's will throughout the webway and beyond. Harlequin Masks fight with near prescient efficiency. With the barest direction from their troop master, each player knows both their own and their comrades' duties. Indeed, despite the lack of a formal military chain of command, masks are capable of acting with far greater synchronicity and discipline than most standing armies. In battle, a mask seems less a group of individuals and more a single, perfectly coordinated entity. Further enhancing this incredible efficiency is the fact that each of a mask's mythic plays has its battlefield counterpart, known by the Eldari as its Sadath. Essentially a strategic battle plan with an allegorical edge. These inform target priority, overall strategy, and whether the conflict should be led by the light, dark, or twilight. The appropriate Sadath will be chosen based upon a range of factors. In some cases, masks specialize in certain mythic cycles, and will rely upon these to the exclusion of all else. In others, the ritual significance of the foe, the battlefield, or even the time of day will inform this decision. Whatever the choice, each Sadath is an intricate and brilliantly conceived strategy, guaranteed to leave the enemy reeling in confusion. Allegorical warfare. Perhaps the most famous Sadath is that of Kagarock's Revenge. It is the military counterpart to the tale of the Fall, the bloodiest and most tragic story known to the Eldari race. Small wonder, then, that its attendant, Sadath, is a vicious strategy valuing headlong slaughter over subtlety or cunning. A mask performing this Sadath relies upon their incredible athleticism and lightning-fast attack craft to propel them swiftly into the heart of the foe. There, the Harlequins kill at a blinding pace, depending upon perfectly orchestrated strafing runs from their supporting grav craft, lethal attacks from their leading players, the dramatis personae, and their own staggering agility to survive the enemy's desperate counterattacks long enough to prevail. A performance of Kagarock's Revenge inevitably carries a high cost in lives for both the Harlequins and their foes. Yet this in itself is rich with symbolism, echoing the horrific death toll and scattered survivors of the Fall. The Harlequins bore all of the sorrows and anger of their people into this lethal Sadath, transmuting their collective memories of the Fall and their loathing of She Who Thirsts into a devastating onslaught that few foes are prepared to face. There are countless other Sadath, each ideally suited to a specific foe or situation. Some are performed by the majority of masks, the 100 Swords of Fall, the Torments of the Fiery Pit, Isha's Weeping, and many others are seen from one side of the galaxy to the other. Conversely, certain Sadath are the specialisms of particular masks, or else are rarely seen outside the direst or most auspicious conflicts. The Serpent's Brood is one such performance, feasible only for entirely airborne masks. The ritual steps of this dance echo the deeds of the Weaver Serpents, the demigod serpent beings that were the young of the great cosmic serpent, within the mythic tales of Kagarock. The anti-grav attack craft play the roles of their legendary namesakes in this dance. Central to this performance is the Sky Stride, a maneuver which sees the Harlequins leap from their Star Weaver transports, displaying incredible agility as they flip, kick, pound, and pirouette amidst the enemy ranks, every violent impact used as a stepping stone to stay aloft. In this way, the players spring across the heads of the enemy, snapping necks, plucking out eyes, and staving in skulls, without ever touching the ground. The whole performance takes but moments before the Harlequins leap back aboard their Star Weavers and scream away into the distance, while the Sky Weavers and Void Weavers cover their retreat. Other examples of these more specialized Sadath include the Hero's Path, Falchu's Blade, and Kagarock's Jest. The The first sees a trio of dramatis personae, a death jester, a shadow seer, and a solitaire, slip behind the enemy lines. They attack suddenly, the Death Jester and Shadow Seer, playing the legendary heroes Ulthanash and Eldanesh, and the Solitaire embodying the monstrous pride that led them into the lair of the Prince of the Iggs. Falchu's blade sees a formation of Sky Weavers and Void Weavers scream down upon the enemy, fighting as the ritual embodiment of the great Hawk's consort as she bore the sword Anaris to Eldanesh's hand. Kagarock's jest, meanwhile, evokes the laughing god's efforts to humble the hunter god Kurnos by stealing one of his antlers, Void Weavers and Sky Weavers blasting a path to the prize before a Harlequin troop lunges in to seize it while the enemy are still reeling. The classical structure of a mask. And we're presented with a diagram depicting the solitaire separate, naturally, and then the troop master above the Shadow Seer and the Death Jester, who, the two of them, are above the troop, who are above the Sky Weavers, and then the Void Weaver. And the whole thing is shaped like a diamond. Players commonly display their troop rune upon a knee, thigh, or shoulder pad. The troop runes for the light, twilight, and dark are the prism, the heart, and the four-pointed star, respectively. Troop masters bear a modified version of these runes, bordered by curving arcs. These are the master symbols, and are often presented as outlines rather than solidly blacked out symbols. The Midnight Sorrow. Knives glint in darkness, nemesis of the damned. The Mask of the Midnight Sorrow numbers many dozens of masks and bands of players, scattered far across the realms of the Eldari, all fighting a constant war against the ruinous powers. The worshippers of chaos face few more determined or single-minded foes. These Harlequins will perform any deed to defy she who thirsts. Where reality tears asunder, and the horrors of the warp spill forth, there can be found the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow. Their warriors whirl through the blazing hellfires of demonic breaches and ritual circles, dispensing death to the servants of the ruinous powers. Masters of forbidden lore who strike upon the toll of the midnight bell, Harlequins of this mask are foremost in Kagarock's war against the dark gods. All Harlequins battle the servants of chaos, yet for the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow, this war has become a destructive obsession where no price is too steep for victory. This grand mask stalks the webway tunnels around the Eye of Terror, striking fearlessly at chaos strongholds wherever they can be found. It was the midnight sorrow that broke open the ninefold vault upon Dementiax and slaughtered its demonic overlords, and they who defeated Lucius the Eternal's coils of perfection upon the bridge of blighted bliss. It was their shadow seers who forged the alliance of bloody tears during the bitter blood wars, comprising the midnight sorrow, the cabal of the flayed skull, and a war host from Craftworld Ymi Locke. This uneasy alliance purged the renegade fortress world of filth pit, despite horrific Eldari losses. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate just how silly the name Filth Pit is for a planet. The monomaniacal focus of the Midnight Sorrow has cost to them not only in lives, but in minds and souls. So intent upon their demonic foe are these Harlequins that all else fades into obscurity. Their battles and performances focus, without exception, upon the dangers of chaos, and in recent centuries they have abandoned all other dances in favor of ever more vivid depictions of the fall. As this mania has overtaken them, so the players of the Midnight Sorrow have become trapped within their roles. All Harlequins sacrifice a portion of their personality to the character they play, but most retain at least a spark of the being who came before, even if only in the interpretation they bring to their role. Not so the Midnight Sorrow. These grim figures rarely speak, except in ritual form, and care for nothing but the final defeat of Slaanesh. The Midnight Sorrow were instrumental in Eldrad Ulthron's scheme to awaken Yniad, and many have taken the colors of the Ynnari. Yet there are those who believe this to be nothing more than an elaborate ruse, a way to manipulate a rival god's followers into spending their lives in Kagarock's cause. Only time will tell. The symbol of the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow takes the form of a spear driven into the inverse heart of the Rune of Twilight. This design reflects the mask's desire to strike when daylight is slain, before darkness reigns. The costumes worn by players in the Midnight Sorrow are dark black, with offsets of bright yellow, while their motley is red and blue. The Veiled Path. The footfall that echoes with another's tread. In many ways, the Mask of the Veiled Path epitomizes every mistrustful thought and resentful prejudice humanity has ever held for the Eldari. Amongst the Asuriani, it is said that to trust the Veiled Path is to step willingly into the void. For all this, they are skilled warriors, and deadly enemies of all who would see the light of the Eldari extinguished at last. Tricksters, manipulators, and riddle-smiths. The Veiled Path are capricious even by the standards of Harlequins. Even other grand masks see the Veiled Path as dangerously untrustworthy, for they have been the architects of countless atrocities. Yet none can deny the list of victories that their duplicity has won them. The Veiled Path's machinations extend throughout the realms of the Eldari and beyond. It was they, for example, who are said to have set the Archon Lady Malice upon the road to her strange encounter in the webway, and the arcane bond with Kagarock that resulted. It was they who sent one of their number under the assumed name of Silandri Veilwalker. I'm sorry, there was a very loud car backfire. I hope the mic didn't pick that up. Anyways, Silandri Veilwalker, to maneuver Prince Uriel into taking up the Spear of Twilight. A shadow seer wearing the same name guided Belisarius' call to his fateful discoveries in the Ariad system, and smoothed the passage of the resurrected Primarch Robut Gilliman back to Terra during his crusade. Yet that same seer also saw to it that Gilliman was forced to rely upon the aid of the sinister wanderer known only as Cypher, and sealed Magnus the Red in the webway before his confrontation with the Primarch reached a fatal conclusion. To what end these confluences and countless others have been arranged, none can say, except the mask's own seers. This Grand Mask's battles and performances are hallucinogenic tangles of double meaning and bewildering mirage. It is not unknown for spectators or allies to vanish without trace, never to be seen again. The Veiled Path have betrayed far more pacts than they have kept, and have stolen away many precious relics and important leaders. Yet, far from being repentant, the Veiled Path seem to take a malicious glee in every promise they break and crisis they cause. How much of this is an act, and how much genuine malice, it is hard to tell. Yet some whisper that the players' grinning masks conceal an ocean of hidden tears. If this is true, then the burden of guilt that the Veiled Path hide must be a dreadful weight indeed. The Veiled Path's rune is the inverse enigma, a signifier of riddles within riddles, plots within plots. It is associated not only with trickery, but with backstabbing and an ill-omened demise. The masks players wear green, black, magenta, and yellow. The frozen stars. The jest that turns to screaming, the warmth frozen stars strike wherever and however they believe will elicit the greatest and grisliest amusement. In some ways they carry themselves as a force for good, striving to inspire their fellow Eldari and follow the steps of the final act. Yet their cheer is reserved only for those they favor, and their mirth is swift to turn cruel and malevolent. Playful and sinister in equal measure, the Mask of Frozen Stars is well known for their players' irrepressible sense of humor. Standing secret vigil over the maiden worlds of the Eastern Fringe, these Harlequins possess a genuine hope for the future of their race. They believe that there is a path to be trod through the horrors of the Rana Dandra that leads to a bright fortune beyond. Following destinies gleaned by their shadow seers from a tangle of potential futures, the Mask seeks to redirect the fate of the galaxy through the destruction of particular key enemies and the precise manipulation of the deeds of others. They wage a war against the slow rot of chaos, the arrogant might of the Imperium, and the reckless expansionism of the Tau Empire, laughing wildly to one another as they murder their foes. See them dance as the toxins take hold. Watch the clumsy Monkey twirl and lumber. Aim for their guts, double them up, make them bow before their final slumber. The White Ghoul's Mirth. The Mask of Frozen Stars cares only for the resurgence of the Eldari and nothing else. They view the galaxy's other races as vermin, there only to serve as the butt of their shockingly violent pranks and jests. Humanity, the Tau, and countless minor alien empires have all suffered the sudden attacks of this grand mask. Often believing the motley clad warriors were coming to their aid, more than one army has discovered that the enemy of their enemy is by no means their friend. Over the millennia, this Mask's players have overloaded the reactors of hive cities, plunged mighty spacecraft unshielded into the warp, and set staunch allies at each other's throats, all in the name of the laughing god's malicious amusement. The opening of the Great Rift has triggered something within the collective psyche of this mask. Whether it be the threat posed by newly birthed warp storms to the Eastern Fringe, the rise of the Ynnari, whom the Frozen Stars regard as the dupes of a false destiny, or the belief that the Rana Dandra is upon them, these Harlequins have become near frenzied. They strike at the forces of chaos and the Imperium with equal vehemence, butcher aliens without mercy, and, all the while, their hysterical laughter echoes on the winds of war. The rune of this mask is that of divergent chance, depicting the pathways of fate propped up on a fountain of certainty and determination. The Frozen Stars are known for their striking black and white costumes. The dreaming shadow, the fervor and energy of the Harlequins becomes something grimmer and more funereal. They are the guardians of myriad symbolic underworlds. Their charge is to ensure that the dead stay dead, and the slumbering never wake. Beneath the glare of dying stars, the mask of the dreaming shadow performs its somber dance of war. It is the ancestral duty of this grand mask to prevent the rise of an ancient foe, to slay whoever it takes to prevent the rebirth of the Necron Empire. The players of the dreaming shadow are bound together by their morbid demeanor, and by the other grand masks' simmering resentment for them. This sentiment, however, is deliberately exaggerated, part act and part truth, and derives from the fact that the war against the Necrons distracts from Kagarock's true battle with She Who Thirsts. For their part, most other Harlequins hold the dreaming shadow's selflessness in high esteem. Yet there are those amongst certain masks, especially the many masks of the Midnight Sorrow, that affect scorn at this grand mask's inherent bitterness and sworn duty, dismissing their war against the Necrons as nothing but a sad sideshow. Regardless, the continued efforts of the dreaming shadow speak for themselves. They have slowed the awakening of dozens of doom worlds over recent centuries, and snuffed the ambitions of others altogether. The Sadath performed by the dreaming shadow are almost always led by troops of the twilight, for they stand ever upon the threshold between life and death. Their ranks are replete with such characters as the Watchman of the Last Road, the Herald of Heg, and the Lock Mistress, roles synonymous with maintaining the natural order and preventing evil spirits from rising to bedevil the living. They spend much of their time in battle, gracing the halls of their kin with performances only when they need to replenish their ranks. The dreaming shadow recruit with a menacing insistence, often against their new comrades' wills. They believe their duties transcend individual desires and have no patience for reticence. The dreaming shadow have a long history of sudden and seemingly unprovoked attacks upon Adeptus Mechanicus dig sites, inquisitorial agents, and newly founded imperial colonies upon outlying planets, and for this they have become reviled by humanity. Yet in recent years, the Dreaming Shadow have been reported fighting as allies alongside the defenders of Forge Worlds and Night Worlds. They have interceded against heretic uprisings, Tyrannid invasions, even Drukhari pirate raids, before vanishing again. Imperial authorities have noted that, shortly after these strange conflicts, there always follows an attack or uprising by Necron forces, and that the Harlequins typically reappear in time to join the final fight against the android menace. The Rune of Unveiled mystery is worn by this mask as an ironic comment, symbolizing the deadly threat the other masks have chosen to forget. The Dreaming Shadows players wear deep greens and reds, often offset by yellow garb. The Soaring Spite. Smoke and starlight entwine like blades, threading paths through their enemies' fire. The soaring spite strike from on high with the suddenness of a lunging serpent. Their victims barely have time to realize their danger before the Harlequins are dispensing death through their ranks. This grand mask bases its entire existence upon the tales of the cosmic serpent's brood. It performs and fights in an almost exclusively airborne fashion, soaring into battle like the Weaver Serpents of the mythic tales. The soaring spite is frequently seen in the company of the Saim Han Asuryani, with whom its players share a spiritual bond. Its performances are also wildly popular within the arenas of the Comorite witch cults. Here, the mask's sky weavers swoop and soar, shedding very real blood as they engage in ritual dances and duels with the best challengers the witch cults have to offer. Since the Great Rift opened, the Soaring Spite have called upon Drukari and Asuryani alike to aid them in their battles, forming lethal airborne hosts that fall on the foe like a storm. The diamond rune of the Soaring Spite signifies a sense of oneness. The players of the Grand Mask wear black and magenta with blue and purple motley. Of all the divine beings and the demigods with whom Kagarock dealt, none were as strange, nor as associated with the Laughing God, as were the Weaver Serpents. These were the cosmic serpent's brood, Star Weaver, Void Weaver, and Sky Weaver, whom Kagarock befriended and bested by turns in order to gain their aid. Each of the serpents was as different from one another as they were from the great Harlequin himself, yet all were drawn into his endless dance. Shadow Seer, Dialogue Moonsong. The Silent Shroud. Shadows formed of light and air. The Silken Knife. Facing the Harlequins of the Laughing God in battle is a terrifying experience, but few masks are as sinister or unsettling as those of the Silent Shroud. They fight without a word, making barely more sound than a sheet of silk whispering across a corpse's skin, even stealing the voices from their victims that they must scream in helpless silence. When the Silent Shroud performs, quiet reigns. Its players speak not a word, and their movements are but the softest sigh upon the air. Even their weapons are muffled through technology and illusion, the hiss of gunfire and the clash of blades echoing dimly, as though piercing the veil from another realm. Needless to say, this disorients and unsettles the mask's foes, only adding to the sensory confusion of the Harlequins' assault. One moment, we were all but overrun by screaming zealots. The next, the Harlequins were amongst them. I almost felt pity for our enemies that day. Kagarock of Ulthway. Everything this grand mask does is veiled in secrecy and stealth, and it often appears from nowhere to stage impromptu performances without need for stage or accompaniment. Whether this be amid the bladed spires of Gomorrah, or the blood and horror of the battlefield, it matters not to the Silent Shroud. Those who have fought alongside the Silent Shroud describe a strange feeling of dread that stole across them in the Harlequin's presence. It is not simply that the Silent Shroud do not speak. They rarely display any outward indication whatsoever of communication, beyond the playing of their roles. They simply seem to know what is required of them, evincing an eerie gestalt mind that sees them act always in perfect concert. Some have described this phenomenon as the will of Kagarock, or suggested that elaborate neurotechnology must be at work. Others claim that the Silent Shroud are nothing more than ghosts of the webway bound with mortal raiment, their souls trapped forever within the masks they wore in life. Whatever the case, the Silent Shroud fight an endless psychological war against the many enemies of the Eldari race. They concentrate their efforts in particular against the Servants of Chaos, launching merciless terror raids that leave naught but staring, white-haired corpses in their wake, and use fear and confusion to undermine and erode their enemy's position until the foe flees in panic. The Silent Shroud wear bright yellows and oranges. Their rune is the thorn-strangled stave, a mythic weapon used by Kurnos, the hunting god of ancient Eldari myth, to strike down his prey without making a sound. The dance without end. Crescendo of the half-heard symphony. All Harlequins exhibit an eerie familiarity with the paths of the webway. For the dance without end, this familiarity has become something more akin to symbiosis. Their oneness with the labyrinth dimension allows them to walk ways closed even to other Harlequins, and it also compels them to fight hardest of all in the webway's defense. The mask of the dance without end falls upon its foe like a hammer blow, appearing as if from thin air with guns already blazing. Full of passion and verve, the players of this grand mask are renowned for their performances of the spiral of mirth and madness. This is the cycle of dances, plays, and monologues that recount the deeds of Kagarock himself, a specialism that is said to bring these Harlequins closer to their deity. So deep is their connection to the laughing god that it is rumored the webway itself flexes and shifts at this mask's behest. Certainly, the dance without end seems always to attack from the most unexpected quarter, vanishing on the breeze should matters go awry. The dance without end traverses the deepest and strangest reaches of the webway, often returning to a confluence known as the Maze of Whispers. The passages of this region are stiflingly still and suffused with a sense of dread, yet through some quirk of fate it survived the opening of the great rift wholly undamaged. Since those terrible days, the dance without end have used the Maze of Whispers as their base of operations in a war to save the webway. Whether the maze is simply a safe staging ground, or whether it conceals some deeper and darker secret, the dance without end will not tell. No other grand mask has fought more furiously in defense of the labyrinth dimension. The dance without end have driven invading demons back from the very gates of the Black Library. They have struck at Necron Dolmen gates that shackled webway tunnels, annihilating them to set those pathways free. They have used flattery and threat in equal measure to forge alliances of Asuriani and Drukari, and have burst into real space to butcher Tyranids, orcs, and humans alike. Any who set foot near a forbidden webway gate find their lives forfeit, whether they knew of its presence or not. The dance without end wear magenta and black with green and blue motley. The rune of myriad paths symbolizes Kagarock's knowledge and the endless nature of his war. The twisted path. The way lit into darkness. Not all routes to victory pass through the realms of logic. Sometimes the caprice and madness of chaos must be met in kind, and strange deeds performed to achieve unexpected ends. Such is the way of the twisted path. This grand mask has a chilling reputation for luring victims into the webway to vanish without a trace. During their performances, audience members will be led onto the stage to take part in the play, only to disappear as the Harlequin's twirling dance reaches its climax. In battle, they steal away friend and foe alike, never to be seen again by their commanders or kin. Where these vanished souls are taken remains a mystery, although rumors abound that it is part of some grand scheme of the Laughing God. Some tales tell of the mask entering battle alongside humans, Tau, or even orcs. It is said that they fight in unsettling concert with these unlikely allies, whose uniforms and vehicles are marked in some subtle way with the rune and colors of the twisted path. These unfortunate auxiliaries rarely survive for long, as the leaders of the twisted path hurl them into harm's way without compunction, spending hundreds of alien lives to spare handfuls of Eldari ones. Yet their auxiliaries show not a hint of reticence. Even the most fanatical imperial warrior or brutish orc laying down their lives in a heartbeat for the Harlequins that fight at their side. How such strange coercion is achieved, or why, is a mystery that the Twisted Path are in no hurry to explain. Indeed, extracting anything of sense from this grand mask is a Herculean task, for their dialogue is peppered with illogical analogies, mind-bending riddles, and hints at lore neither safe nor sought for. Neither are the goals of this mask clear. Over the millennia they have been sighted fighting from one end of the galaxy to the other, emerging from the webway apparently at random to launch rapid, often costly attacks, before vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. In some places their arrival destabilizes the balance within an entrenched war zone, usually to the detriment of all involved. In others they trigger fresh conflicts, massacre selfless guardians or mighty champions, or inflict untold miseries upon what seem like entirely undeserving victims. Nor do the Twisted Path always fight until the battle is done. Their troops have been sighted abandoning the fight just as victory seems inevitable, leaving the enemy survivors to wonder why their attackers vanished instead of striking the killing blow. Such erratic behavior has made many Asuryani and Drukhari reluctant to put their trust in the Twisted Path. If the Masks players are troubled by this, they do not show it, continuing to pursue their strange agenda with unseemly enthusiasm and twisted glee. The Mask of the Twisted Path wear the rune of stolen grace, symbolizing the souls taken by the laughing god. They wear red, orange, and pink over black. The Shattered Mirage. Echoes of tumult's end, the encore of laments. The Eldari have fought against their ending for millennia, casting other races into harm's way, and reading the weave of fate to foresee and thus avoid one catastrophe after another. Still, it seems to many as though their end draws ever closer. Rather than shy from it or seek to prevent it, the Shattered Mirage take death as their muse. The mask of the Shattered Mirage is the embodiment of the laughing god's maudlin mirth in the face of his race's demise. Both their kin and their enemies fear this grand mask's players. Their performances are dark and laden with dread, conveying only fatalistic despair to their audiences. Those drawn too deeply into the Shattered Mirage's dances are moved to take up arms. Internecine battles have been triggered in the streets of Camorra by the Shattered Mirage, while even the more reserved Asuryani have launched into grim wars against impossible odds at their urging. It is not hard to see why many Eldari view this grand mask as heralds of ill omen. Still, none are foolish enough to impede their coming. In battle, the Shattered Mirage fight with a reckless abandon that is horrific to behold, and even in death they take dozens of the foe screaming with them to the grave. To fight the Shattered Mirage is to fight a foe with no fear of death, intent only on the destruction of their enemies, no matter the cost. Nor do the Shattered Mirage Mirage shy from using forbidden weapons and calling upon horrific allies to heighten the bloodshed. In recent centuries, they have unleashed several weapons of the ancient Eldari, terrible works of arcane science that even the Drukhari would be hesitant to deploy. They have been seen fighting alongside the creeping shadow ghouls of Elindrach, and even make allies of the twisted homunculi and their ghastly broods. For all their hopeless philosophizing and acceptance of the end, the Shattered Mirage are actually a spectacular force of destruction. They strike where no enemy would believe them insane enough to, and more often than not, their sheer audacity and selflessness secure victory against all odds. This has led some Asuryani to speculate that hopelessness may simply be a role the Shattered Mirage play. Perhaps, they say, their performance is intended to secure eventual victory for the Eldari through the seeming abandonment of just that resolution. The rune of the Lamented Dead is integral to the mindset of the mask of the Shattered Mirage. Contained within its graceful lines and bladed curves is the ultimate demise of all things. And since the Great Rift opened, the players of the Shattered Mirage have taken to carving this rune directly into their flesh. They wear white and bright blue garb, with motley of white and earthen hues. The Reaper's Mirth, a jest inscribed in blood, the breath between a laugh and a scream. There are few Harlequin Masks whose outright cruelty and malice come close to the deeds of the Reaper's Mirth. So wholeheartedly spiteful are their sedeth, and so bloody their performances, that they are viewed with something akin to horror by their craft-world kin, and with grudging respect by the Drukhari of Comora. All Harlequins imbue the killing of their enemies with symbolism and significance, but the Reaper's Mirth are the undisputed masters of ironic murder. The players of this grand mask seize any opportunity to take the laughing god's bloody humor to an extreme. For the Reaper's Mirth, every battlefield is a gory canvas upon which they paint their masterpieces of death. It is not enough to simply kill their enemies. They must be made examples of in the most extravagant manner. The carrion tableau arranged in the Palace of Crystal Bones, the hideous demise of Garrex Five's garrison in the Hall of Echoed Screams, and the Fountain of Crimson Tears, an atrocity so cruel that it led to the destruction by exterminatus of an entire world. These were all works of the Reaper's Mirth, and all will live on in the folklore of the Eldari and their victims alike as vivid, living nightmares. Because of their penchant for inventive cruelty, this mask attracts a higher proportion of death jesters to join their ranks than do most Harlequin forces. These macabre warriors take sardonic pleasure in fighting alongside the players of the Reaper's Mirth. They applaud as the Harlequins enact their performances of genocide and horrific destruction, and add their own suggestions to escalate the excesses of violence still further. This mask has a disproportionate number of troops of the dark, and its ranks are thick with cruel and macabre personalities, such as Cain Wrathful and the Queen of Shards. Yet, perversely, almost every troop leader of the Reaper's Mirth plays a role of the light. These figures make a great show of dismay at the vicious antics of their followers, acting out exaggerated shock and penitence at each excessive killing the troops perform. They do not stop the slaughter, but are often witnessed fighting all the harder, as though seeking to atone for their fellows' dark deeds with acts of selflessness. There is allegory here, of course. Everything the Mask of the Reaper's Mirth do is a reference to the tragedy of the fall, and with every battle they fight and dance they perform, they seek to remind their people of the dichotomy of light and darkness that lurks within their souls. The rune of the Reaper's Mirth represents a blooded weapon and the enemy's last breath. These Harlequins wear white, scarlet, and purple. And now, we bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're still listening, this has been a long one. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. Be well, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.